Hello and welcome to the Everyday Amazing podcast. I'm your host, Simon Platt, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Thando Jacobs. On a personal note, Thando is a father, husband, and musician. Professionally, he's a business analyst consultant and the host of the excellent Inside Business Analysis podcast, a topic we're going to explore today. But first of all, welcome to the show, Thando. How are you?
Oh, Simon, I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for that beautiful intro. Loved it.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Been practicing. It took a couple of takes, but yeah, no, really appreciate you getting on, coming on the show. So I guess first and foremost, if I kind of set the scene in terms of how we know each other and the brief topic of conversation for the listeners. So you and I are both business analysts by profession, by trade, and that's kind of how we connected on that sort of professional circuit over the
Mm,
last year or so. But that's not what I'm keen to talk to you about today. What I'm keen to talk to you about today is my aspiration for this podcast, the Everyday Amazing podcast, is I firmly believe that every single one of us has the capacity within us to be an inspiration for other people. And I might make you blush a little bit here, but the fact I'm sitting here, sort of early on my journey in terms of podcasting is in some small part to you. So I've listened to your content for some time now, and I was very fortunate to be a guest on your podcast not long ago. And that was part of my confidence building to say, do you know what? I'm going to take a leap of faith and go for it. So I really want to explore your journey. I want to explore a little bit more about the podcast today. But I guess the best place to start is for those not familiar with you, not familiar with the Inside Business Analysis podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that to begin with?
yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Simon. First of all, I really appreciate you getting inspired by my podcast. So, Inside Business Analysis, it really is a podcast with a mission of really unpacking what goes on inside the world of business analysis, and also giving a almost a window view of those who are not in this world to kind of really learn about what truly goes on in this world of the career and the profession of business analysis. And so I bring on expert guests like yourself to effectively discuss a range of topics related to business analysis, but obviously business analysis is a career, so we also have got guests who kind of look into the career side of things and looking for jobs in general and or building your LinkedIn profile, XYZ. So that's kind of what it is now. But the honest truth was, when it started off for me, it was really just a passion project at the time. I kind of just started it as I always have conversations with people. I'm always reaching out to people and being like, hey, let's have a virtual coffee and chat. And then one day I just kind of thought, I always ask, but I never really give them anything in return. So I thought actually a good thing to give in return is to say, I'm going to record this conversation and we'll put it on the podcast. That way, at least they'll have something that they can also point to and say, yeah, I've been on a podcast, and click the link to check it out, and maybe even build their own professional profiles whilst they're at it as well.
So it seems like, and I'm trying to think of the right word here. It feels like you're a veteran now of podcasting, but this is still something that's relatively, I guess, new for you. So how long has the podcast been going for?
So I started in July last year, so not long at all. You're probably looking at like 10 months now, or 9.
Mm.
And as far as the Inside Business podcast is concerned, yeah, it's still early days. In fact, when I started off, I did 16 episodes initially, and then I took a month off, and then I started again, and I'm still going at it now. So, I don't know if I'm going to take another break and then start again. We'll see, but time will tell.
So where did the inspiration come from? Do you recall the moment or moments where you thought, I'm going to do a podcast?
So do you know what? I've actually always been involved, or maybe been around, should I say, with things that happen in the business analysis kind of profession space. And so I'm thinking about things like meetups, virtually or in person, things like webinars and trainings and all these things. I've kind of been almost engaged and involved with a number of people who are doing this. And every time I go to one of them, I always think to myself, you know what? I would love to contribute to the BA space. I feel like I have something to share, but at the same time, I was like, the only things I see happening are people training, right? People training people to become business analysts, or I see mentors, people mentoring others in this space, but I don't really see many who are like almost. Well, sorry, and then I do see people who have a voice in this world, but their voices are articles, LinkedIn posts, or books. And I kind of thought, okay, great. another avenue that's not explored is podcasting, or really not explored in depth. And that's what then eventually kind of gave me that, like, let me go that route, because I'm not trying to be like everybody else, but I'm also trying to contribute something that feels fresh and new and different. And therefore, podcasting just kind of felt like the natural route to choose because of that reason.
Yeah, excuse me. Sorry, that's fascinating. I smiled a little bit there because that's not too dissimilar to my own experience. I felt
Mm,
like, and it'd be good to get your view on it. I felt like for the longest time, I had a voice. I had something to say, and I couldn't quite work out what it was, and also why. And those are two
mm,
things that I wrestled with for some time. And I even remember having a conversation with an old line manager. I say old, not as in age, but a line manager I used to work with, probably about 2.5 years ago. And I just said, I feel like I have something to contribute. To borrow your word, I feel like I have something to contribute to my profession and beyond that, but I'm not quite sure what it is. And that took me quite a long time. I've only recently sort of got into podcasting, etc. So it took me a long, long time to kind of really think about what I want to talk about and why. Is that something you can relate to?
Oh, totally. Like I still feel like I'm not 100% sure myself as well in some of the answers. I think, yeah, you just have this intuition, right? To be like, I just know the feeling, but I can't logically explain or what I want to contribute, why I feel this way, and all the rest of it. But it's just something that's there, and it's been there for years. To be honest with you, Simon, it's really been there for a very long time, and it's only, I guess, last year when I decided to, I guess, effectively, literally give myself a platform to just try it and see what it looks like. And I feel like the more I'm doing it, the more I'm starting to. It's really interesting. The more you start to give yourself the platform, the more you then start to unpack the reasons why you felt the way you felt, and also what it is that you're trying to say. And I think I made the mistake of trying to answer those questions before starting. Whereas now, actually, I'm like, as I'm doing it, I'm like, actually, it's better the other way around. It's almost like you figure it out as you're going along, as opposed to trying to map everything out before you start.
I love that. I love that because when I decided I was going to do this podcast, I remember publishing something on LinkedIn basically saying, I'm going to have a podcast. And at that point, I had no guest, I had no recording, I had no content, but it was like, I'm going to put a stake in the ground
Hmm.
and I'm going to commit to it. And it was scary, but also it gave me that energy to kind of push forward and not keep procrastinating about it. Keep
Exactly.
keep dwelling on it. Can I take you back to the beginning? Do you remember your first guest and what that experience was like when you first hit record and had that conversation?
Do you know, my first guest is still a very special guest in my mind. So that's someone called Karen Ewenham, and I don't know if you know her, Simon.
I know Karen. Shout out to Karen. She's listening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shout out to Karen. So Karen was my very, very first guest, and I literally reached out to Karen. She was one of the people that actually inspired me, believe it or not, because I think she has like a YouTube channel or something that she was kind of doing around business analysis. But also, I'd actually met Karen in person because we worked in the same city, and I called Karen and I reached out to Karen and LinkedIn, and I said, would you be interested? And she says, yeah. And I was like, oh, now I need to come up with the questions because she's
Mhm.
actually said yes. Um, and then I thought, okay, let's just go for it and let's just do it. And to be honest with you, if you do listen to that episode, funny enough, you will notice that, in particular, my early episodes, there was almost no agenda. Like, I just kind of invited them along, and I had a couple of questions that I've written down, but almost half of that conversation was just natural and fluid, and just me asking questions, just as the conversation was going on. And so it was very much like I'm just going with the flow here. I don't really know what is going to come from it. And I came out of that recording. So before going into it, to answer your question, how I felt, I, I had a bag of mixed emotions, as you can imagine, right? It's like, is this going to really work out? In the sense of like, is the vision I've got in my head actually going to come to life? Um, and for Karen as well, would she find it good, or would it be like a waste of time? Or I'm just like, all of these things are back of mind. But then I press record, and I just kind of like, right, let's just forget about that. Let's just go for it and just have the conversation. Let's just chat. And I literally say to myself, forget the fact that you're recording. Just have a chat with Karen. I came out of that conversation and I thought, my goodness, I'm glad I recorded that because that was so powerful. There's so many things that she shared that I'm just like, yeah, that was such an incredible discussion, and it literally almost instantly made me realize why like this conversation was needed and why I felt like podcasting was the route I wanted to take, and also why I'm not doing a solo podcast of me talking by myself all the time and I'm interviewing people. It's kind of like all the reasons why I chose a podcast, the reason why I chose to interview people, it kind of then made sense after that very first conversation.
So almost like that real time feedback loop of, okay, this is what, almost like a validation. Going
Yeah,
into it a little bit scary, a little bit nervous, but hang on, this is why I want to do this.
exactly that. Yeah, it was such a cool experience though.
Yeah, no, I bet, and I can relate because obviously I'm a lot. I mean, this is a very early recording for me, so I'm still on that journey, and but it is exciting. There is that.
Mm,
I have to admit, the conversations I've had so far, and I'm not just saying this. I mean this 100% genuine. I come off it with a real high, like the conversation, even if I wasn't recording, because I've always said
yeah,
to me, certainly for what I'm trying to do, my measures of success first and foremost are I want to learn. I want to get to know people. I want to learn. And if I learn, first and foremost, brilliant. And every single conversation I've had, to some extent, I've learned something. I've been inspired by it. I've gone off to do a little bit of research. I've taken a slightly different course of action. So for me personally, very selfishly, I'm getting the reward that I'm seeking from it. And then the sort of next measure of outcome is you hope it finds an audience and that other people might take something away from it as well. I think I want to ask you, sorry, just going back to those early days, and I
yeah,
found this was a massive learning curve, and you gave me a bit of a crash course. You and I had a half-hour conversation where you gave me a crash course on logistics. So the bit I love is this. I love just having a talk, but there's a lot that goes before it. There's a lot goes after it to get some kind of product packaged up and out there. So you gave me a bit of a crash course, right? And I've got to my right, I've got my Trello board of things I had to do before I could even hit record, right? You may be familiar with this. It'd be good to get your view on this. Well, first and foremost, have an insight session with Thando, which I did. Decide on a podcast name. Create a Gmail account, and these are in no particular order by any means. Create a logo, create a LinkedIn page, create a YouTube page, create a YouTube studio account, create Spotify for podcasters account, create a Buzzsprout account, create an Apple content account, create a Riverside account, create a Linktree account, and then buy a
yep,
microphone, buy a microphone stand, buy a web camera, and then like the logistics were just. I have to admit, at one point, I remember feeling a little bit overwhelmed because I just wanted to sit down and have conversations, and the, for better lack of a word, the admin, the logistics. I kept wrestling with for the longest time. I kept wrestling, saying, "It feels too hard. It feels difficult, too difficult. I just want to sit down and have a conversation." Is that something you experience as well?
So probably not as much. And the reason for that, Simon, is because content creation is not new to me. Maybe if I'm to think of it from that perspective, I've always been into content creation before it was called content creation. In some way, shape, or form, I've always kind of been into I've always had a camera, for example, right, taking pictures, recording videos. So I think there's always been an element of that in me to kind of know that, yeah, this is just what it takes to, to get there. I think for me, however, the way I approached it was to simply say, what's the quickest path to get to where I need to get to without without thinking like I'm like the next Joe Rogan here. Like I'm not trying to set up the next best studio, the next best thing you've ever heard of. I just need, what's the best way I can just hit record and publish, and that's done. So I think that narrowed it down. However, to your point, there was an element of understanding the logistics of it because it is different. Podcasting is different to video, because with video you can just, for example, upload it to YouTube and you're done, really, and then you share the link. Whereas with podcasting, there are different platforms, and each platform has its own way of working, and it's just like, oh my goodness, I thought I could just publish it to one and then they do the rest for me. But there are some like that. But equally speaking, yeah, it gets a bit more convoluted. So I did find that surprising for me actually, in that space. Equipment wise, I did, and this is where my problem comes in. And my wife says I'm too much of a business analyst in this instance, which is I end up doing a lot of research into different microphones, different headphones, and watching a lot of YouTube videos, reading a lot of articles, and 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 I remember one day I just literally said to myself, I just need to just buy one and just go for it. Like, I'm overthinking this, I'm not getting to that stage. I'm overthinking it. I'm over analyzing it. I'm overdoing it almost, and I just need to do it. So from an equipment perspective, I still don't even have a webcam, for example. I'm just using my laptop camera. I literally had to do that. I literally had to say, just buy a microphone because you definitely need one. But apart from that, just use what you got and just deal with it. I had to say that to myself. So that initial bit was, yeah, that was my fault of diving deep, but I'm naturally like that. So I just need to, learn when to stop analyzing, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting though. So in terms of, you mentioned there about obviously content creation isn't new to you.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess there's a whole kind of journey leading up to the podcast. So what sort of content have you created before? What was the sort of the sort of journey that led up to where you are now?
Yeah, I've created a range of different content. To be honest, Simon, if I've probably touched on a lot of different things, all of it, by the way, was never linked or related to my career. So this was kind of outside interests and other things. So you're looking at YouTube. I've done YouTube videos. I've done kind of the more short form content on TikTok, Instagram stuff, um, blog articles, newsletters on email and things of that nature. So I've kind of done all of that, and have some exposure to all of that. I think the difference this time was because it was career focused in terms of like business analysis. There's almost a there's there's almost an interesting mindset shift that had to happen in me, because for example, I'm a musician, right? It's easy to record a video of me playing my instrument and upload that because it feels natural. It's part of being a musician. It's part of like being in music. Typically speaking, that's what happens. Whereas what I do as a business analyst in my job or my career, there's no natural link to content creation. So it was almost as if there was a mental barrier, like to be like, no, you don't have to be creative in this arena. This is not a creative thing. This is a profession. It's a job. It's serious. Da 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 da. So because of that, I actually then started off with posting on LinkedIn instead, because that's the place where professionals meet, and it's kind of this nice hybrid world where it's almost social media but it's almost still corporate-y. So I started to kind of create posts on LinkedIn initially, but my LinkedIn posts weren't like, I didn't really give them the kind of, I guess, seriousness that I should have given them at the time. I was just kind of like, okay, let's just post something and see what happens. Let's just try something, see what happens. The podcast was almost a no, no, no. Let me just go for it. Let's not play like small here. Let's just, if I'm going to do it, let me do it properly. Let me do it right. And that's where the podcast really made me do that. So even though the content creation side of things wasn't new, I still had to kind of make the mental connection to my job, because that's not a natural connection, but there is a natural connection with music and media, because it's all part of the same umbrella.
So you're talking about content creation then, and the podcast is a kind of not a combination, but it's a part of a journey that was already sort of in flight that you were on. Um, what advice would you give to anybody that's listening that going back to our conversation earlier on about sometimes people feel like they've got a voice, but they're not quite sure how to
Mm,
share it and what medium. So whether
mm.
it's podcasting, blogs, webinars, etc., what advice would you give from your own personal experience about how you find that voice and the means to share it?
Do you know what I would say? I think the first thing I say is look inward and not outward. And I had to learn this the hard way. And by this, what I mean really is naturally speaking, people end up like looking outward to see what other people are doing. So they might look at me and you and say, "Oh, Thando and Simon have a podcast, so I need a podcast." Or they might look at other people and say they've got a YouTube channel, so I need a YouTube channel too. And I think it's good to be inspired by people, but look inward in the sense of understanding what which of the platforms kind of feel natural or feel right to you in this moment. Because there's so many these days, right? You could be on TikTok, you can be on Instagram, you can be on LinkedIn, you can be on YouTube, you can be on podcast, you could do a newsletter, email. There's so many different avenues to, I guess, speak your voice. Um, but I think start off with the avenue that kind of feels the most natural to you, or the one that feels the most comfortable to you. Because with all of these platforms, as we've alluded to, there's a learning curve from a logistics perspective. How do you make this work? How do you make that work? And if you let it, that would distract you from kind of just speaking your voice. If I don't know if that makes sense. It's almost like you end up being so focused on the microphone as opposed to the message that you're trying to actually say, and things of that nature. So my advice would be just start off with the one that feels natural. It's not like you're committing for the rest of your life. You're just saying, okay, right now this is the thing that feels natural for me, so I'm going to start off, with this thing. Eventually, it might evolve into something else. You might try it and realize, okay, as much as I like reading articles, I don't like writing articles. You could have the learning curve position and have that situation. And I think that's the way I would say it. It's almost just learn by doing, as opposed to thinking you have to figure it out from day one.
Yeah, I can resonate with that because so for example, like I not just outside this podcast, I have a voice on things like neurodiversity, neuroinclusivity,
Mm,
etc. that I'm really passionate about. But for me, my sort of to your point about my natural safe space is on LinkedIn because it's got that, like you say, it's a mix of professional plus social media, and I feel that's appropriate for me. I feel it's for better lack of a word, a safe environment. It feels quite natural to me. Things like TikTok, Instagram, etc., completely alien to me. No way I'm going anywhere near those because it's just
mm,
not my thing. It would feel completely unnatural for me to kind of have a voice or to put any kind of content out on those. So that's really interesting. I think as well, like you say, it's looking inwards, like trying to find what do you care about. Because I think you can speak to that a little bit better. And it's interesting because even when I came on your podcast, I didn't really talk about business analysis per se, but I
no.
don't often talk, even on things like LinkedIn. That I don't necessarily talk about business analysis per se, tools and techniques. I personally, for me, I find that my authentic voice is around. In that instance, I was talking to you about comfort zone and how you can be brave and bold, which you could argue is agnostic of business analysis. That's something that can be applied
Yeah.
whatever your profession, whatever your walk of life. And to me, that was going back to our earlier conversation, that's the bit that took me quite a long while to figure out. Like, what is my
Mm,
voice? What's my authentic voice that I can put content out there on whatever medium, and it's true to me and true to what
mm.
I sort of believe in and what I care about.
Yeah, and on that, I definitely think that everybody does have something to share in some way, shape, or form. Now, for some people, it might necessarily say, for example, be on social media. It might be within the intranet blog within your company, or it might be a specific, I don't know, within your immediate team at work. You just kind of send in a weekly email or whatever, rounding off things that you're thinking. So not everything necessarily needs to be in the public kind of facing domain. Some things are, for a team or even for a group, a closed group of, for example, for me, it might be a closed group of the musicians that I play with, as an example, right? So I think everybody does have a voice in that way, and how you use it, you can also identify that. And also, as part of looking inward, you're also asking yourself in the sense of, am I comfortable with talking about this with the people I already know who are in my life, or am I wanting to kind of put it out there into the world? And I think that's a part of that. But one thing that's for sure, and for my experience anyway, is that the journey to finding your voice is ongoing. It's really interesting. It's not necessarily that day one you know what your voice is, you know exactly how things are. It's just that you just need to start. Just need to start, really. Because, if, like I was saying to you earlier, the way my podcasts are now done are very different to the way that they were done when I initially started. When I initially started, it was very open. It was very much like, let's just talk and we'll go with the wind. Whereas now it's a little bit more structured, it's a little bit more different. But that's and the way I'm approaching it is also quite different. And that's me just kind of finding my voice a little bit more and fine tuning it each time I'm doing it. And I think that's probably one thing I'll definitely add on to that as well.
Do you find your confidence has also grown since you've been doing this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's grown. It's grown because for a lot of different reasons. Actually, the first thing is that when you when you I guess when you commit to doing something on a weekly basis, there's something about commitment that makes you more confident. Um, there's something about showing up that makes you more confident. That's like half the battle, I think, in confidence. It's just show up, just show up every week or every 2 weeks, if that's your cycle, whatever that means. But just showing up consistently to to your voice in that, to kind of carry on that analogy. Just continue showing up to that, and that's what builds your confidence. The second thing is then also because I'm interviewing people, I'm constantly meeting a lot of new people, but I'm also constantly building relationships with the same people. Again, it's that closed loop of I don't just want you on my podcast. I also want this to be something bigger than that. And I think that then boosts your confidence because all of a sudden you're starting to put yourself out there. I have to put myself out of my comfort zone almost every time I reach out to someone and say, "Hey, would you like to be on my podcast?" Right? That's especially someone I've never spoken to before. They don't know who I am, and I'm DMing them on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, this is me, and this is what I'm doing. Would you be interested to have a conversation?" And that doing that over time helps to build your confidence. And the confidence is not necessarily arrogance in the sense of like, oh, I know people will say yes to me, but it's more the confidence to reach to the next stranger and ask
Mm.
them the question, as opposed to whether they say yes or no. It is what it is. I can't control that,
Yeah,
but I've got the
yeah.
confidence to do it again to somebody else.
Are you familiar? And the answer, are you familiar with somebody called Harry Mack?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm familiar with a couple of people called Harry Mack. One of them is a freestyle rapper. I don't know if that's who
That's
you're
him. Yeah,
referring
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
That exactly Harry Mack. So for anybody who doesn't know, Harry Mack, in my opinion, is simply the greatest freestyle rapper
I
alive.
have to
Right?
say I agree. I agree.
Phenomenal. Just an incredible talent he's built over 20 years. Essentially, given free words, and he can create these just incredible freestyle raps. And he also uses what I call his superpower for good. It's always uplifting. It's always positive,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
And Tando's probably thinking, why on earth have I brought up Harry Mack? But Harry Mack is a content creator on YouTube, and I admire him so much. I've listened to a few of his podcasts. He does podcasts now where he sort of gives an insight into his life and his journey.
Hmm.
And even now, he's been doing this for years, and even now he's widely recognized as being just this incredible talent. He still talks about how incredibly nervous and vulnerable he feels when he walks up to strangers to say, "Hey, I'm Harry Mack. I'm doing freestyles. Can I do a freestyle for you?" And I just think that's just part of being human, isn't it? It's like,
Yes.
even someone like him, and I encourage anybody to go and Google him, you will not be disappointed,
Hmm.
is still incredibly nervous and has that worry when he reaches out to people. And it's fascinating sometimes to watch his content because you see sometimes people look at him like, who is this guy? Like, who is this person that's just approaching me? And by the end of it, they're full of
Just
smiles and they're
mind blown.
uplifted. And
Yeah.
yeah, something you said just resonate with me there in terms of, I think no matter how often you do it, it can be nervous trying to build relationships with other people, right? That you don't
Hmm.
know. It can be
Yeah,
scary.
and the reality of that is this: and I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I genuinely think you can't expect to find your voice if you're not going to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself out there in terms of finding your voice and building the confidence to speak your message. And also, you need people. You can't speak your message by yourself. Almost, there's an element of some collaboration is needed, some partnership sort of thing is needed. Take Harry Mack for example. He could have taken the route that I guess traditional rappers would have, which is just turn up in the street with a microphone and just start rapping randomly and hope that somebody likes what they hear and stops to listen to you. But he's literally doing the opposite of that. He's going to people and saying, "Hey Simon, give me three random words and I'll do a rap for you right now." And it's almost like you're putting the power in their hands almost to dictate what you're doing, which actually then is, I think if he wasn't doing that, he wouldn't be as big as he is. I think the reason why he's grown so much is because of that collaboration piece and that partnership piece and that whole idea of the fact that you can't expect to build your voice by yourself. You kind of have to work with other people at some stage.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I'm so happy I finally got Harry Mack into a podcast. I'm just absolutely blown away by him. But the key word you said there is collaboration, right? It's
Yeah.
collaboration, whether you're podcasting, whether you're doing a webinar, whether you're doing a presentation, whether you're doing a live
Mm.
freestyle to a bunch of strangers. It's collaboration. It's not, hey, this is my show and I'm just going to talk at you or rap at you or sing at you and thank you very much and I'm on my way. It is a collaboration. One final question I want to ask you actually. So what are your sort of aspirations or hopes for the podcast? Have you got any guests that you're kind of, if you could get your dream guests on, anybody that you'd like to get on board? And yeah, where do you see the show sort of in the future?
So inside business analysis, my aspirations with it is really to turn it into a platform that, first of all, people can get fresh and different ideas around business analysis. I think, I love everything that's out there, but I think a lot of it needs a refresh. and by refresh, I guess I'm meaning more around the repackaging of the message, not necessarily the message itself. And the biggest reason for that is because the business analysis profession is highly sought after still in the industry, the tech industry. A lot of people want to become business analysts, but I find a lot of the way that the message is packaged, and I don't mean any offense with this, but it's really directed at like millennials and maybe even baby boomers and older, but not much is being done to package it to the upcoming business analysts, for example. And therefore that's why you typically find, I don't know what the stats are, but I wouldn't be surprised if the average business analyst was kind of in their 40s as opposed to 20s. And so for me, that's a big part. I'm just trying to think of like thinking ahead of this profession. What's another way that we could repackage what we have that it looks attractive to somebody who's in university right now, and makes them want to consider it. And then another thing is then, hence the name Inside Business Analysis, is also to highlight and showcase the work that truly goes on inside the world of business analysis. It is a profession that we do a lot, we achieve a lot, we accomplish a lot, but we don't really talk about it a lot. At least we don't do it outside of our circles. If you go to like a business analysis event, conference or meetup or whatever, there is a lot of things that are said and spoken about. But then if you speak to another career that we work with, another job that we kind of work directly with, they wouldn't be too clued up with what we bring to the table or what we do, because we do a lot, but we do it in silence. So another big part is to then how can we kind of continuously showcase what we're doing, hence the conversations. The conversations are aiming to kind of put it out there into the world of the great things that everyone's doing in this space, and carry on in that way. And I think those two things are kind of like a very big vision, at least in my mind, in terms of how they will come to pass and like what things will look like at the end of this year and next year and beyond. I'm going with the flow as of right now, and we will just see where things lead.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's good. No, best of luck to you. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the podcast and your content. So looking forward to whatever the future brings.
I
If people
appreciate
listening
that.
want to kind of learn more, get in touch, etc., how do they do that?
LinkedIn, search for Thando Jacobs. That's Thando, Jacobs last name. You would definitely find me on there.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on there, Thando. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. I appreciate it.